In this video, we're going to be looking at conditional binding on both attribute and also text content. Let's run through the example first so we can see what we're trying to achieve, and then we're going to have a look at how we achieve that. So first of all, I have an input that has a data-valid attribute that is set to true. This is actually driven by the binding engine. We'll see that a little bit later. And there's a valid and an invalid name. If I type in the word John, that is an invalid name. And if it is an invalid name, I want to make the text red. And you'll also see that this div is now hidden, while this div says that it's an invalid name. If I change this to Jane, then you'll see that it's valid again. This div says valid, and the hidden attribute is removed from this element here. Let's go and have a look at how we did that. The first thing to note is that we have a value bind to first name. So we have that two-way binding set up. So when I type into the input, it sets the first name. All of our other binding expressions kind of rely on the first name being set. So let's go and have a look at each item and then explain them bit by bit. The first one you'll see is that we have a hidden, or we have a data-value.if. So this means that this is a conditional binding, and it then expects a ternary kind of expression where you can define what this value needs to be based on the expression. Here we can see that we're doing a check that if the first name is not equal to John, I want the value to be true, but if it is John, I want the value to be false. So we have that JavaScript ternary definition over here. The second example that we have here is that inside of this text, we want to either display the words invalid or valid. And it's also based upon a condition, and it also uses a ternary type of expression. A couple of things to note between the example above and the example below. In the example above, we mark this with a .if, so we know that this is a expression that is expected and that there will be some form of ternary values being passed on. So we don't have to use the $curly brackets here. In this case, this whole thing is wrapped in a $curly brackets as an expression. So it's a small nuance, but it's an important nuance for the binding engine to pick up and say, oh, okay, hang on. There's something special happening here. It's not like I have this composite string that I'm putting together. This whole thing is like an expression that will determine what the value will be. And the last item is just a hidden.if. It's very much the same as this one over here, but you'll see that we don't have a ternary in here. So what this means is that if the expression passes, this attribute will be set. And because we don't actually give it a value, the attribute name is also the attribute value. So you use that for things like disable, hidden, all that kind of stuff. And then on the style sheets, you can see that if the thing contains a hidden attribute, then the display is none. So if this expression fails, then this attribute is also removed. I have docked the two screens side by side so we can see what the binding expression is and how it plays out. First, let's add a valid value, so we'll just say Jane and we'll tab out. So we can see that the data-value equals true, the div says it's a valid name, and there is no hidden attribute here, it's still there. So on the input we can see it says data-value.if first name is not equal to John, then it's true. Since the word is Jane, the data-value is true because that's what we set it to be. The content of the div here says that if the first name is John, then it should be invalid, but since it's Jane, it's putting in the value valid name, as that's what we can see there. And we can see here that there is no hidden attribute. Let us go and change this to John now. The data dash attribute here is false. Why is it false? Because the first name is John, therefore false. We can see that it says invalid name because the first name is John, so it should be valid name. And we now have a hidden attribute on this div because we said that if this expression is true, then this attribute must exist. And since the first name is John, it added an attribute for us called hidden, and the style sheet hides it for us. I think you can see that conditional binding is very powerful. It takes a little bit of exercise to get used to it. Let us just have a look at the pitfalls again. The first pitfall is saying that if I add the .if to my attribute binding, I don't have to have the curly brackets there because the if already tells me that I'm dealing with a condition. No need for the additional markup. On the div, however, we have no idea what the context of this is, whether you want to concatenate stuff or whether there's a condition to be executed. So we wrap the entire expression inside of the $curly brackets so that the binding engine knows, oh, okay, well, I'm dealing with a conditional value that will be set inside of this curly bracket expression.